Hey,
Kyle.
Good job.
Oh, here we go. Wait, Rex is here?
Yes.
I'm confused. Are we sitting over there?
Let's do modular on this side, integrate on that side.
Ooh.
All right.
All right. Good morning, everyone. So today we're going to do the great debate, the modular versus integrated. But to start off, we'll do introductions. So why don't we start at the end and come this way? Can you just say your name, your project, and maybe, for those unfamiliar, 1 to 2 sentences on what you're building?
Sure. My name is JoshuaTobkin. I'm a co-founder and CEO of Supra. Supra is a vertically integrated blockchain, an all-in-one blockchain. That means a high-throughput, low-latency blockchain with native Oracle price feeds, automation, cross-chain communication, and on-chain randomness.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kyle Samani. I'm a co-founder at Multicoin Capital. We're an investment firm, manage a hedge fund and a venture fund focused on the crypto space. Been around since 2017, early in Solana and DeepIn and a bunch of other stuff.
I'm Nick White. I'm at Celestia Labs, and we're building Celestia, which is the first modular blockchain network. And essentially, you can think of Celestia as an L1 that is designed specifically for rollups. So it doesn't do any execution on-chain. All execution happens off-chain, and Celestia just does consensus and data availability. By doing that, you can give more flexibility to developers, and you can have a massively scalable layer 1. So we're targeting in the future gigabyte blocks, which will be several orders of magnitude more throughput than any current even high throughput chain that exists today.
I'm Rushi, one of the co-founders of Movement. We're bringing the Move virtual machine to Ethereum and beyond, really focused on high throughput execution, fast finality, formal verification, and generally better user experience for builders on Ethereum, Bitcoin, and beyond. Super excited to be here today.
Awesome. And I'm Rex Kirshner. I'm the host of the Expansion podcast, Blockworks' latest podcast. And you can see all of the members of this panel, except for Josh, will get you on the podcast. So make sure to subscribe. So I want to start us off with kind of like level setting and defining kind of modular versus integrated. But I think most people in this space kind of understand it. So we'll go a little bit deeper. So for each of you, can you help us understand what makes a system modular versus integrated? And for the modular side over here, I want to hear, do you think that innovations like network extensions make something like Solana modular? And for the integrated guys, do you think that combining data availability with interop, like Celestia is doing with ZK accounts, does that make them integrated? So we'll go backwards this time. Rushi, do you want to start us off?
My definition of modular is the ability to specialize and focus on one area of the stack. So we're probably the worst person to talk about DA. I think Nick was better at DA than I am. We're really focused on execution and really optimizing that for user experience, focused on building an ecosystem and community. We're not really good at consensus. We're not really good at DA. There's better people in the industry for that. So a general thesis is when you can hyper optimize for one area of the stack, you can get really good at it. And that enables you to pick the best partners for other layers of the stack as well. So I think the general thesis when we look at it is right now, I think the best analogy I had was cars, right? When you produce a car, it comes off the shelf as manufactured, but over time, like you have different brakes, different chassis, different parts of the car. So for an app-specific builder, you can be like, okay, here's the best DA provider, here's the best settlement provider, here's the best execution provider. And the thesis of modularity enables competition because now you have like 5 different DA layers, 5 different sequencing layers, 10 different execution layers. And yes, in the short term, that creates fragmentation probably, but in the long term, I argue it creates competition, which brews better user experience. So the end state 5 years from now is you have hyper-optimized areas of stack, and then builders can choose whatever they want. And reality is probably be 3 to 4 layers of stack that win, and we're focused on execution layer.
Nick? That was a great definition. I'd say that the origins of modularity go back to the idea that you can separate execution, like smart contracts and applications, from the consensus and data availability layer, meaning that you don't have to do everything within one single monolithic protocol. And when you separate and decouple those things, you get all these benefits of customizability and scalability. I would say that now modularity has like expanded to encompass more things. So we have not just execution layers and DA layers, but we have shared sequencers, we have prover networks, and it's kind of becoming this emerging, evolving ecosystem. of all these different components that developers can use to mix and match to build their ideal stack for their use case.
I think that's part of the question maybe I can chime in on is, if you look at what people are doing building network extensions on Solana, does that make it more modular? So I think there's kind of two things. One is like, what is the core design of the system from the L1 team, and what are they focusing on? And there's a secondary question of like, well, what do other people do? These systems are all permissionless, and so by definition, anyone can do anything. And nothing has really changed in Solana land since 2018 in terms of focus on high performance, integrated, control the full stack, make the system as performant as possible for kind of decentralized NASDAQ kind of a thing. And in fact, we've arguably seen that the Solana ecosystem move even more strongly in that direction, with specifically their new 0 thing that is kind of starting to be, kind of came out of breakpoint, still a little undefined and can't get too much into it, but you'll start to see a lot of noise from a lot of folks around this new 0 thing to literally make the internet go faster, which I previously didn't think was possible. And so there's that approach, and that's unchanged. And then there's a bunch of random people doing stuff on Solana, and there's people building SVM rollups, and there's people building ephemeral rollups, and there's people building other kind of customized network extensions like Zeta and Grass and others. And I'm generally in favor of people doing those other things. I don't think people building vanilla SVM rollups, whether they settle to Solana, Ethereum, Celestia, or anywhere else, are particularly interesting because they don't do anything functionally different than Solana mainnet. And I don't really think they're going to go anywhere. What I am interested in is people building new execution layers that do things that Solana mainnet cannot do. And I think what Grass is doing squarely falls in that bucket. What Zeta is doing squarely falls in that bucket. And so generally supportive of seeing these kinds of things happen.
So sorry, Kyle, can I just jump in there and ask, do you consider Solana the project a integrated project, but the Solana the ecosystem something that is like some sort of hybrid between integrated and modular just based on whatever people permissionlessly decide to build?
I mean, the core system is intended to be integrated and is like very objectively, but like it's permissionless and you can do whatever you want on top of it, right? And so other people can go do other stuff. I think the core distinction in my mind is like, is the L1 team making technical decisions with an assumption that you're scaling via a separate layer or not? And the Solana team is not assuming the existence of any, secondary layers.
Fair. Josh?
Yeah, at Supra, we also kind of are a little bit closer to the Solana point of view. I do want to make it clear that any global scale software development is modular, even though Supra could be described as a mega monolith. The consensus protocol, the data availability quorum certificate, the Oracle protocol, these are actually modular. So we can replace and update components without changing the whole system. So modular development is good. Now, the thing that we think is better, though, is to have a shared network of nodes that have shared security that do all these services. Instead of having a modular component network here, a disparate network, a set of nodes here for one piece, another piece for another network for another piece, which actually increases latency. When you communicate from different network to different network, those networks have to also achieve their sense of finality or security guarantees, which inevitably will create latency. Now, if you vertically integrate the stack across a single shared set of nodes, you actually have shared security, you have faster finality, and you also have a single token model. So we think this is, in our opinion, that technology always trends towards greater vertical integration. So this is what we're doing.
I want to chime in, actually. One important point is that modular software does not make like a protocol modular, right? Like Cosmos, the Cosmos SDK and Tendermint was sort of the first like modular design paradigm for building blockchains, but it was a software paradigm, not a protocol paradigm. So like each chain is still individual, but the point of modularity is that you can reuse the literal protocols. So I don't have to deploy a new chain. If I want to deploy a rollup, I can plug into Celestia or I can plug into Ethereum. And that's what makes it so powerful. The other thing is, I think modularity is kind of inevitable even for these monolithic chains like Solana. Like, you know, a year or so ago, I kept saying like Solana is going to have L2s. It's going to be modular. Like it's like trying to fight gravity. It's like just there's so many benefits that like it will just happen on every chain. And I think, I mean, look, it's happening on Bitcoin as well. I think that every layer one is a data availability layer. They just don't know it yet.
I mean, the best example is today, Uniswap just announced Unichain, right? This was part of the monolithic Ethereum environment, probably the app that many of us have used today, and now they have their own chain, will build their own ecosystem using OP Stack, which is modular, quote unquote. I'm sure they're discussing DA layers and stuff. Does it make it more fragmented? That's TBD. We'll see how superchain thesis plays out, but I think the end game is once the app reaches escape velocity, reaches PMF, it's in your interest. And for token holders for UniToken, there's sequencer fees now coming back to you. And that's a result of modularity and the ability for Uniswap to now go Unichain, which is something that even the Ethereum people, I think Vitalik tweeted that Uniswap would never go Unichain. Today, here it is.
Now, Nick, you mentioned layer ones are actually data availability layers. I do agree. And we, for example, when we propagate batches, actually every single node in our system can be a batch producer. But in order for that batch to be included in our block, we actually have to form a data availability quorum certificate. We have to prove that the data is available before we can actually add it to a block. So this is necessary, by the way. And my team, you know, are some renowned cryptographers and distributed systems PhDs and such. And I'm the type of guy that's really focused on product. And I'm saying, wait a second, do we really have to do that? Can we deal with this on the execution? And it turns out the answer is no. So we have to have data availability QCs one way or the other. You have to prove that the data is available before you execute.
So I think everyone have kind of like shown their hand for the answer to these questions. So feel free to give one-word answers or to expound as much as you want. But I just kind of want to get a temperature check. Is Bitcoin modular or integrated? And is Ethereum modular or integrated? So let's go this way. Rushi?
They're modular, and if they aren't agreeing to it, they don't know it yet. Like there's some, like I can't name like how many pitch decks in Bitcoin L2s. Like it seems like everyone in the Bitcoin ecosystem is opting toward this L2 system. I think a few days ago we announced we could do ZK, like the team announced we could do ZK proofs on Bitcoin directly. So I think like if you ever want to actually use Bitcoin, it'll have to be the modular stance. I'm not a Bitcoin guy. I'm sure there's better people who can talk about it. Ethereum, like it touched on, like Uniswap just announced they're using Unichain, and I'm sure like every other blue chip, I think Polymark is using Polychain as well. Maybe different name choice there, but we'll see.
I think that, so when I said that every L1 is a DA layer, what I meant is like inevitably that's how they will be used, like all the execution will move off chain. And but I think that like there's a huge variance in obviously which chains have actually been designed with that paradigm in mind. So Celestia was the first blockchain to be designed with that explicit goal of just only doing DA. And you know, since then, Ethereum is like the first pre-existing L1 community to realize, okay, that's actually where the puck is going, and so let's start to modularize essentially. So that's why they added 4844, and like dank sharding is a major part of their scaling roadmap. But like, you know, Bitcoin is not designed for that whatsoever, and they kind of have like ossification. But luckily, because it's permissionless, you have teams that are designing BitVM, which promises to at least enable some form of like settlement on top of Bitcoin. But yeah, so I would say like Bitcoin definitely not modular. I think Ethereum is in the transition from monolithic to modular, so they're kind of like modulithic for now. But I think their end game is definitely modular.
Kyle?
Bitcoin is an integrated system. I mean, Bitcoin people will tell you Bitcoin's had smart contracts since the beginning with the whole scripting language thing. It's a little generous, but like, sure. I mean, there is a compute budget. Like you can execute, you know, code and implement covenants and stuff. So in terms of a binary designation, I think it's an integrated system. I think it's just an objectively terrible system at both DA and execution. So it's just kind of stupid. And, you know, all these people doing Bitcoin L2s are all very obviously struggling with all of the technical constraints of Bitcoin to try and make their systems work. And so far, no one has actually delivered anything there. I think some of them will deliver some stuff, but as of today, there's really nothing of substance there. I should say nothing of substance in production. As it pertains to Ethereum, I mean, obviously it started integrated. It's obviously moving towards modular. That transition is very non-binary and may, in fact, not complete in the way that was originally envisioned a few years ago. I think there's probably a few more questions today about that transition than there were previously. So Celestia is very much the most pure kind of modular system.
Bitcoin is an application-specific chain, does one thing, so I guess it's integrated. In terms of Ethereum, I want to make this one point. I don't know if folks realize that back in like 2017, 2018, Ethereum was going for like 1,064 shards. And they pivoted to the layer 2 strategy out of pressure of high throughput chains like Solana, AVAX, and others. I believe that was kind of an emergency pivot. I know that might be a little bit sacrilege, but bottom line is, I think the layer 2 strategy is a result of the layer 1 not scaling. Now, that said, I think Ethereum should focus on scaling the layer 1, but I also think on Ethereum, there will be layer 2s for various types of additional compute. For example, EigenLayer, using restaking, is bringing what are effectively Oracle services, verifiable compute services, on top of Ethereum. By the way, that is an instance of vertical integration. So, however, that is a little bit more modular. My general point of view, and us at Supra, we think that you really should focus on scaling the layer 1, that Nielsen's law, Moore's law, they're continuing to increase and improve, and single nodes can be doing more than one thing. And it's a very natural evolution. Look at technology. The iPhone moment was the consolidation of large screen, GPS, compute, storage, one device that enables new applications. Imagine if I had to carry around a modem, a printer, an extension for a TV, and an antenna in order to do what the iPhone does. So we believe it's just very natural to just vertically integrate, and we think technology has shown this time and time again, and that blockchain is not going to be any different.
Yeah, I disagree that Ethereum should focus on the L1 because it's going to lose. Look at Swedes Mississeti, look at Solana's Fire Dancer. If Ethereum woke up today and was like, let's optimize the L1, it would take them 5 years to get like one upgrade in, while like Swedes, Solana, Aptos, et cetera, would kill them. So I think the current state of Ethereum is they have to modularize to even have a chance of competing with L1s. And for better or for worse, we'll see how that plays out. But I think if Ethereum even tried to focus on optimizing L1, it would be a bloodbath.
Is Max Resnick in the audience?
All right, so the next two questions I want to kind of put both integrated and modular in the hot seat. So we'll start with integrated. I think one of the biggest selling points of the modular ecosystem is that it really fosters innovation, that anyone can kind of come to the table and see their own particular vision, and then they have the Lego pieces to build that specific thing, and to start to create new things that weren't really conceivable unless you put the Move VM with Celestia on top of Ethereum, right? How do you think about how integrated systems can really foster development? And I guess more basically, do you think that is a fair kind of pushback that the modular community puts on integrated, that it is just less fostering of innovation? So we'll mix it up this time. Why don't we do Kyle, then Josh, and then Nick, and then Rishi?
Yeah, so the ethos of the kind of modular vision started with Cosmos and Polkadot. Although they're mechanically different than Celestia today, the ethos, I would argue, was actually more or less the same. And I remember calling Zaki and calling the Polkadot from Cosmos, and Jack and Gavin and Yuta and all the Polkadot people over the 2018, 19, 20 period. And I was like, guys, you're saying you can do all these customizations and stuff. What are the apps that are taking advantage of it? And none of them ever gave me answers that I found compelling. They would say some stuff you could do some encrypted mempools for MEV protection, which is cool. It's different. I'm not sure it's compelling, but it's at least cool. Besides that, I really haven't found anything. And so and that was back starting then, and obviously I continue to this day, still speak to folks, and you clearly have more customizability in a modular configuration. No questions asked. I'm just not sure what it's useful for. And I've kind of come to use this term. People like to call blockchains world computers, state machines. You pick your kind of fancy term that sounds big and important. And I've kind of decided to call blockchains the exact opposite, which is an asset ledger, which is an explicitly intentional, boring accounting term. And I want to like emphasize the word boring, because in that lens, like, what properties matter, cheap, fast, like that's it. Just make it go cheap and fast. And I'm pretty convinced that like cheap, fast provides 99% of all theoretical value. There's obviously things you can't optimize for on the margin. I'm just not particularly convinced they collectively add up to more than maybe 1%. So I'm looking to be proven wrong, but so far I've not found anything.
I think that the industry is still nascent. It's still pretty early. So I think, yes, let 1,000 flowers bloom. Mm-hmm. That said, Supra itself is modular in its monolithic stack. So if there turns out to be a better approach for one of our components, we could upgrade. And we will. Now, the thing is, we have designed each of our protocols and components from first principles. We literally focus on how many hops does each protocol take to complete. And for example, our Oracle protocol, our version 2 is finalizing data on 600 to 900 milliseconds. That's full finality, not just pumping the data out. That's actually final. And we argue that actually to remain safe and live, this is the limit. In our consensus protocol called Moonshot consensus is kind of piggybacking on the classical literature of consensus protocols. And we also believe that this is the limit. Both of these protocols, by the way, got into top academic venues. So this is not just me saying it. It is kind of what other, through peer review process seems to be the case. So, but if there is a new technology or approach that does better, we will probably use it, and our stack is modular. So if someone from the modular ecosystem comes up with something very brilliant, which they do all the time, by the way, we may use it, but at the moment, we're quite satisfied with our current direction.
There's a lot I could say. I'm wearing this shirt that says build whatever, and that is the motto of the modular ecosystem. And what it means is that you, as the builder, should have the ability to build whatever you want. And the way that manifests in modularity is all these components you can choose, the fact that you have abundant block space, so you're not constrained by the scalability that has sort of been a constant factor, at least in the traditional L1s like Ethereum. Now, there's Kyle was saying basically, well, what are the compelling customizations that you can do? Well, there's a lot of different things that I can say. First of all, even if you were to be able to slot in, let's say the modular ecosystem, you're experimenting with a new execution layer, and all of a sudden, the monolithic chain wants to adopt that. That's great, but they can only really run one single experiment at a time because there's one chain and one protocol. The beautiful thing about modularity is you can be running multiple experiments at the same time. So you're not constrained into just one fixed experiment, essentially. So you kind of, to me, it's the difference between a centrally planned economy versus a free market for infrastructure and experimentation. And then in terms of what kind of customizations are actually interesting, or what kind of app chains are interesting, there's a lot of things. First of all, you could customize a pre-existing execution environment like the EVM. Certain teams have added native ZK verification to the EVM to reduce the gas costs of that, so you can do things with privacy, or that you can add support for custom curves for verifying signatures that enable you to sign directly from your transaction directly from your secure enclave on your phone, things that actually really materially impact the user experience, as well as actually even improving scalability, cost and throughput, which I agree are really big factors. There are a couple of apps built on Celestia that are really good examples of what you can do as an application-specific chain. One that we announced last week is Pay, And essentially, they're a chain that could not exist if they weren't a rollup. You couldn't build the equivalent on Solana or Ethereum because they're essentially one of their core features is privacy. And to enable that, they have built a rollup that has a custom execution environment, not even execution environment, but it's like Zcash. So it's like a UTXO-based chain, and it needs to be that. So like there's no way to build that on a pre-existing chain. And then there's something called Prism, which is building it's not even really an asset ledger. It's like a way to enable end-to-end encryption for the first time. And it's a protocol that's not even like an execution environment or like an application in the traditional sense that we think of. So like this is like, to me, modular blows wide open the design space that people can play around with.
I do want to just mention one thing. Now, monolithic chains and teams, they can still run many experiments. We can follow the scientific method. Like, for example, we run like 4 or 5 different test nets, testing different things. Iterate. So we just look at the data, we stress test it, flood it with transactions, see how it handles it. So we don't actually have to run just one thing at a time. We can run many experiments as well. The beauty, though, of the modular approach, credit where credit's due, of course, is that there are different teams doing different things. So there's different flavors and different insights that maybe we didn't come up with. But I do want to make it clear that we do run many experiments also.
Well, I think testnet experiments a lot different than like mainnet production experiments, right? Like anyone can run 10 different testnets. I can do that tomorrow, right? But it's a question of like, okay, getting to mainnet, getting users, getting adoption. Does it get adoption? The real experiment is, can I build it and can people use it? So to Nick's point, it's like only in the modular world can you have like this Cambrian explosion of experiments that are on mainnet, have venture capital, have their own ecosystems, have their own community. And majority of these things will probably not pan out in 6 to 7 years. But that's the nature of experimentation. Test out different sequencers, test out different execution layers, new programming languages. Like what I'm doing is a completely new programming language that people called dead last year and now seeing it revitalizing. I think the way I define it is velocity production. In the monolithic layer 1 environment, there's obviously hundreds of layer 1s. They don't really build on top of each other. They're all like, okay, here's my new consensus, here's my new chain, here's my new community, and here's my new token. But it's not really building on top of each other, right? But in the modular world, you have thousands of teams, thousands of labs entities, all optimizing on different areas of the stack. So the future is like, okay, if you're app builder, you'll have the work of all these thousands of labs entities that have all worked together to combined to this modular future. So my takeaway is that 1,000 labs teams and 1,000 lab dev teams will always outpace a single labs entity. No matter how good Solana Labs is, obviously some of the best engineering work on the planet, the velocity of production that we'll see over the next 3 to 4 years in the modular world, which is actually happening on Solana mainnet itself, will slowly outpace that of the layer 1 world.
All right, so to put the hot seat on the modular side, I think like a very just obvious principle of like, let's say mechanical engineering, right, is the weakest point of any structure are the joints. And while modularity is so great because it gives sovereignty and the ability for experimentation and innovation, it inherently introduces like millions and millions of joints, right? And each joint is like, you have to engineer something, you have to trust that the other team engineered the right thing, and then you have to build like kind of a connection. And so in this space that's built around, or should be built around trustlessness and 100% uptime and like unstoppable applications, how do you think about just like the inherent centralization and trust assumptions and all these things that come together when you're like kind of mixing and matching across a bunch of different teams and ecosystems and people you might not even know to create like your chain or application or whatever? So start this time on the modular side. Rishi, do you want to just keep going?
I think the short term, it introduces UX. I think like if you want to build an SVM app today, probably better to do it, or REST app, it's probably better to do it on mainnet. So in the short term, I would argue that yes, we're sacrificing UX per se, but the bet is in the 6 to 7 years future where over time, as you battle test, as companies rise, raise money, go die, over multiple cycles, you'll have like this consolidation. So modularity introduces this like explosion of different teams experimenting. Majority of these things won't pan out, but that's the point. Experimentation, mess around and find out. And then over time, as systems are tested, people are like, oh wait, this works, this doesn't work, you'll have consolidation, and that's when the UX gets better. Again, like you can look to Web 2 where you had like if you look at Web 2 web parts, you have like Vue, React, and all the components. There's so much software, so much open source software. Most of this doesn't pan out, and developers kind of choose what they want in endgame. I think we'll see that going forward, where in the start we had UX issues, but over time, as teams get better, tech improves, things hit mainnet, it consolidates.
So sorry, let me just jump in on that, because like the difference between regular open source stuff and this crypto stuff is like there's random people out there with their money on the line, and like failure to them is like catastrophic. So like how it's one thing to say like there's going to be 1,000 experiments and 999 are going to fail, but like in this space, when that means that like some grandma gave Do Kwon her money to do this, like don't we have a responsibility to like think that through?
Well, there's also markets, right? If you launch a chain that which is mainnet and it's like you didn't audit it, obviously no one's going to use your chain, right? Well, hopefully not. I hope we have like optimized users. But the thesis is there will be a bunch of experimentations, but the market itself will choose like, okay, the chain that has built ecosystem, that has multiple audits, that has in-depth research of their protocol is the one that I should use. And I think people aren't using the random meme chain that launches on like an OP stack. They're probably using the more sophisticated rollups that we see today.
Fair.
Yeah, I think this is a really fair critique of modularity, is that it's still very early days, and you know all this experimentation does create fragmentation, not at like the app and liquidity layer. That is true, but even at the interface layer. And so you know it's like harder than you'd think to actually integrate all these things when everyone has their own standard and their own way of doing it. And it means that things take longer in the short term, but I think that long term standards will emerge. But until then, yeah, it's going to be like less efficient than it could be.
And more dangerous?
I don't think more dangerous. I don't think that like the interfaces themselves cause like more security issues necessarily. And like you can always bake in redundancy. So for example, like with Ethereum rollups, Celestia has fallback to Ethereum DA if like the Celestia network goes down, for example. So like you can actually build in more redundancy in some senses in a modular system.
Fair.
I'll push back on that. I think the modular systems are explicitly riskier, especially anything predicated on whether it's fraud proofs or ZK proofs. Because especially on the ZK side, like, dude, that's just there's like could be a bug in there that we just don't know about. It's hard to say like with confidence that we'll be sure the ZK systems don't have some catastrophic cryptographic bug, probably for another few years. I'm not saying that I think there is specific vulnerabilities, but to be able to say with conviction there's none, I think pretty definitively it's too early. So I do think that's kind of a riskier point. But the biggest challenge I have with the modular stuff is not security related. It's incentive related. The L2 teams today are averse to the L1 team, and vice versa. And this is explicit because the L2 teams are paying the L1 teams for DA. And so one, decreasing costs for one means decreasing revenue for the other, and there's just no way around that fact. And I more tokens, more complexity, more team members who have diverging incentives. I think that's actually kind of the biggest problem, is just more complexity at kind of all layers of the stack, but in particular the human motivation layer.
I think that's a good insight. Also, let's think about it. Okay, if you're a layer 2 or a layer 3, what are the components? We have sequencer, data availability layer, execution layer, oracle layer, bridge layer. Your application that probably needs many of these things is as secure as the weakest component you integrate. And this could be disastrous, right? So we think shared security is super important. We think modularity is going to introduce many tokens as well. It's going to get more expensive, and it'll always be slower than the layer 1 itself if you can optimize the layer 1. So the way we look at it is it's less secure, it's more expensive, it's slower, and it's more complex for developers. They have to manage different frameworks and different things. So remember, I keep on going back to why do we have this modular paradigm? It's because, as far as I know, because Ethereum didn't scale and they had to pivot to a layer 2 strategy. So, that's just my point of view. I think it's accurate.
All right, so we only have 5 minutes left, so I am going to ask you to keep your answers tight on this one. But just to walk us out for the last question, either take the positive or the negative view. But if you were talking to a high schooler who was very interested in building a blockchain-based application, or maybe L1 or whatever, what would you say to either convince them to go modular integrated or convince them away from going integrated modular? So why don't we run it back towards me for the final question? Josh, you want to start us off?
Okay, so I would say, what are you trying to build? Are you trying to optimize for lowest latency, high security, and a single stack that can do everything? I do think blockchains today can be execution engines, but they can be doing verifiable compute. They can be doing, such as Oracle services, price feeds, on-chain randomness, privacy. These things can be done on a singular layer. So it depends on what their motivation is. But I would suggest to them, do you think that experimentation is more important, or do you think that getting to the final end game of the most optimized system is more important?
My advice for anyone who's wanting to build a new app is stop thinking. just go to an integrated system. It's a boring asset ledger. It's great. Use it. Have fun. Go focus on application layer questions. Asset ledgers are a mechanical detail.
I would say that it really depends. I don't think that building on a shared execution layer, whether it's monolithic or as a L2, is a bad thing. I think and it can actually be very advantageous if you're just trying to mess around and you want to plug into a pre-existing chain with a community and liquidity and things like that. I think that what I would say is if and when that application becomes successful, that high schooler or whoever the app builder should definitely consider building modular, because they will get to customize everything to make their application that much better. They will be able to capture more value. So to me, it's like a no-brainer, but it's not that they need to jump straight to the end game. But I think that the reality is that all successful, not all, but majority of successful applications will be built as application-specific chains, likely on modular rails.
I would ask them, do you want to build the next Honey, which is part of Google Chrome, or next Amazon.com? Your TAM is much bigger when you have customizations of your end-to-end tech stack. You can eventually be your own product and have people build on top of you. It pays much more to be an ecosystem and foster community than it does to be a keg in the wheel.
Yeah, I mean, all great answers. And I do think it's just worth highlighting, especially what Kyle said, which is like, focus on your application, focus on creating value and like giving something that users want to use. And then like, we can have these debates on stages like this about like modular versus monolithic, but at the end of the day, like drive towards use cases and like, let's make this technology relevant outside of like computer nerds and investors, right? So I want to thank all of our panelists. So can we get a round of applause for the panelists? Thank you for once again walking us through the modular versus integrated debate. And I took away a lot. I hope you guys did as well. And just thank you guys.
Thanks, Rex.
Thanks, Rex.
Thanks.